So we have just 5 slides we're going to share and talk about real quick, shared services in practice. So NA and COVID-19 has had a tremendous impact right now on services. And, you know, Steve is here with me because Northern New Jersey has had shared services for a number of years. We're going to just talk a little bit about these few points, the differences between shared services and collaboration. We're going to talk a little bit about the idea of could shared services work in separate regions, and then between zones, we're going to do a little talk about examples of shared services and collaborations, and then spend just a second talking about getting a project started. So, I'm going to let Steve talk a little bit about the shared services model in Northern New Jersey and New Jersey region.
Sure, I'm Steve and I'm an addict. So as Wilvina pointed out, New Jersey, the state of New Jersey is 2 regions. New Jersey region, which was the original region, and probably around 1990 or so, Northern New Jersey formed as a separate region. We broke away from the New Jersey region, so you still have the New Jersey region and the Northern New Jersey region. But for any number of reasons, we felt it was impractical to have multiple helplines, multiple websites, multiple meeting lists. So we started a shared service committee between the 2 regions, probably in the early 90s. So this goes back at least that long. And from time to time, we add or remove services from the shared service. We have a formalized agreement. The way that we work it is everything that makes sense, we do as a shared service, and everything that doesn't make sense, we do on our own. Each region is responsible for their own meeting list chair, and their own website chair, and their own helpline chair, and their own public relations chair, and their own history and archives was added to it recently. So each of those committees meets on its own, and the shared committee meets as well. Things like website and meeting lists have their own separate meetings, as well as the committees within each region. It sounds more complicated than it is. The key is we've built bridges so that we're used to talking to each other. So when something like this COVID came along and all the meetings in the state started closing down, excuse me, we already had a facility for us to communicate, for us to talk, and for us to handle it, and for us to disseminate information. One of the big things, and this go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, I know you were getting ready to make a point, but the real difference between like formalized shared services and collaboration.
Yes, that's perfect. That's exactly where I was about to go. So about 5 years ago, we added public relations and public relations. Somebody had an idea that a lot of what we do, and if you think back to the whole concept of state, nation, province, regardless of how you feel about that whole concept, from a governmental perspective, the state of New Jersey has a single Department of Corrections. Each county has their own jail and things along those lines. So there's a need for public relations to work within the area, within the region, and join the multiple areas together, and within the entire state. So there was the idea to add both public relations and H&I to the shared service agreement. After much debate, they decided, since most of what H&I does is at the local level and the regional H&I is simply a coordination, they didn't feel a need to join H&I to the shared service agreement, but they did add public relations. So now public relations has its own projects and its own things that it does, but from time to time, a project will spin up in one region or the other, and they'll use shared services to communicate. For example, the bus posters that New Jersey region did was done in both regions. It was financed through the New Jersey region, and both regions benefited, both regions participated. That's a more formalized agreement, and how they do it, they spin up special projects and communicate between. They have a standing committee. The difference on collaboration over the last year, and COVID, of course, put a kibosh on a lot of it, but we'll be picking it up again. There's a conversation based on some things that started in northern New Jersey region. New Jersey region decided they wanted a bigger conversation with State Department of Corrections. So while H&I is not part of the shared service agreement, both regions are collaborating on a specific project. Is this going to be the precursor to H&I joining the shared service agreement? At this point, it doesn't matter. They're simply collaborating in an informal way. They're sharing each other's experience, strength, and hope. They're counting on the seventh tradition of human resources to participate and give them the energy they need to build this into something that can do something, and start with contacts that will ultimately benefit both regions. So that's kind of where you were going with that, the difference between collaboration and a formal, but the shared service agreement itself is a formalized agreement, just like your policies and things along those lines. It's updated on a regular basis. It's signed by the RD and the chair from both regions.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just going to return to this slide for a second because, you know, we just talked a little bit about the differences. Like, for example, I am from the Eastern New York region, and we have regional public relations, but we don't have regional H&I. So one question about whether or not shared services could work in separate regions and how that might be set up, and examples of that kind of scenario. One thing I just want to talk about in terms of COVID-19 and its impact with that. Our H&I and public relations has been operating for years, like just completely parallel tracks. There was no communication between the two of them. There wasn't really a need seen for any communication. So now with the COVID-19 scenario, you have H&I facilities that are realizing that they have to do a lot more of an active reach out to H&I, and then realizing that they pretty much have to talk to H&I to get the existing contacts. And I think I'm kind of wondering, and maybe you might be able to answer this, Steve, about whether or not the H&I and PR people in your shared services model were more quickly able to respond by getting that facility's information together, and how you might envision other regions might be able to kind of help each other do a larger collaboration with the process like this.
I definitely think having people that are already familiar with each other, already talking to each other, makes it infinitely easier when you need to react in this situation where there's a crisis. So in this particular case, the fact that, you know, regional PR in both regions were already talking on a regular basis, already communicating on a regular basis, made things a lot easier. H&I, on the other hand, was a little slower to get going because H&I in itself hasn't really been sharing across the different areas. So the things that are working in New Jersey region aren't necessarily translating to North Jersey and vice versa, because they don't have the form. There's a handful of people that are reaching across the aisle, but there isn't as formalized a communication channel.
Right. So, okay, that kind of gets us to the last slide, and we had a long talk about this yesterday in terms of effective leadership and what is really happening to, you know, to start building the collaboration, and really relying on making some personal phone calls across the channel, checking in, reporting back with communication, building consensus, and then taking creative action. So, you know, based on the conversation, you know, that we had about this yesterday, can you just review some of the important points of effective leadership to start, initiate projects and, take it to a wider collaboration level.
Absolutely. So it's a double-edged sword. When people start acting outside the context of their position, certain people and a number of us kind of do what we think is right, but it's not always right. At the same time, based on some people's obvious leadership skills and abilities, have the energy and the willingness to reach out and to form relationships with other people. So counting on those relationships has definitely helped us. There are a number of members of my region that have been working with people in the New Jersey region for literally decades. So, just as most committees, when we form a committee, we don't necessarily write the guidelines and then start a committee. We say, hey, listen, what if we started doing something? We start getting things going, and this goes back to when I first got here, is there weren't a whole lot of anything. So somebody says, let's start a meeting. That's how a meeting started. Let's start an area. That's how an area started. Things aren't working over there. Let's create our own world or fellowship development. We have this need. Let's fulfill this need. And we start fulfilling this need. And as we fulfill this need, then as things start to go, we realize, well, we're kind of not really fulfilling our mission. What should our mission be? And we start to define it a little bit better. So that's when we start to put guardrails around things. But that's where effective leadership starts to come in, as somebody with a vision that's not acting on their own, but acting in the best interest of the fellowship and doing what we've been taught here, and not saying, hey, listen, I did this really awesome thing. What can we do as a team? What can we do as an area? What can we do as a region to help the still suffering addict, and recognize that everything we're doing has to be based on how is this helping us further carry the message, and not how is this working to further make Steve look really cool, because Steve is really not that cool.
Oh, well, you know what, Steve, I want to emphasize what you're saying by just reading a couple of sentences from another Look IP. It's one of my favorites. It talks about the idea that goodwill is an action that includes others besides ourselves, a way that considers others as important in their own lives as they are with ours. And then the other piece that you were alluding to, creative action is not a mysterious procedure. Often it means simply listening to those hunches and intuitive feelings that we would think benefit others or ourselves, and acting on them spontaneously. So I think on the one hand, and really the kind of crux of this matter here, there's a lot of us who are on this call right now, a lot of us who are formally in committees or just individuals or interested members, that we're listening to some hunches to do things, but ultimately our group conscience process and the principles of action mean that we make some phone calls, we reach out to people, we touch base if we want to initiate some of these projects, which is exactly what's been happening. And then the other piece that Ramon and Matt were alluding to is that sometimes, making decisions and articulating things might make people have responses that are make people a target, or things that are not popular, or things that people want to criticize and attack. But ultimately, the idea of creative action and starting a project starts with a couple of people speaking, communicating, bringing it back to their committees, and then a mushroom effect that actually starts to galvanize action and make things happen. So with that, I'm hoping that some of these examples have been helpful. I know that one of the things we're trying to do in the Northeast Zone, and I know Matt and Ramon alluded to that, our committees meet in tandem on the third Tuesday of the month. Southeast Zonal Forum Task Force meets, I think, an hour and 90 minutes before the Northeast Zonal Forum. And some of the projects that we're starting to work on is creating PSAs and instructional videos for public relations so that people can quickly access the information. I think that the other piece too with the H&I portion, I know that prisons are extremely underserved at this point, and that the ability to reach out through a multiple regional effort and through a zonal effort. And I know that just recently in the state of New Jersey, the Department of Corrections Society was getting ready to have a big conference that the zone had collaborated to have multiple people do a booth sharing and find out if we could do a presentation in that context. They canceled that conference. But here's the idea and the challenge really to everybody on this call. We can now have conferences where we invite professionals, we can have information forums, and we can start to set those things up now. And that's really the challenge for all of us right now in getting projects started. We have the ability now to, I mean, yesterday there must have been 15 multiple speaker jams happening for recovery. I would like to see even half the amount of multiple conferences where we're inviting professionals, we're informing the public, and we're letting people know across states, regions, and zones about our message, and also letting them know that we can bring it in virtually. So I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Steve, because I think our time is coming to a close.
Yeah, it's got about 4 minutes left. We're good.
Okay.
No, I think, excuse me, I think you did great. That conference that you were talking about is something that started from the collaboration, not the shared service agreement, because of the foundation built by the shared service agreement. So, and we talked yesterday, we talked about, Northern New Jersey is situated between New Jersey region and Greater New York, Eastern New York. So there are things that we can do within our region that'll impact those things, like billboards and things along those lines that impact others. So that the way to start the conversation is to start the conversation and see where it goes from there. At the same time, recognize that a billboard in Northern New Jersey has no impact on people in Rochester or Northern New York, Western New York, Northern New England. So not everything is appropriate for everything, but especially within your neighborhood. But now, as we start to work and develop those contacts, the contacts that we have to talk to the billboard company, and of course I realize I'm talking about billboards in a time when nobody's on the road, but this is not going to last forever. But the contacts that we develop might be helpful to the people in Connecticut or the people in Boston or the people in Florida, because a lot of these companies are nationwide. So if we develop a good relationship with somebody, it may help somebody in Pittsburgh, or it might help somebody in Montana, or something along those lines.
Right.
And that's where the joint experience, strength, and hope comes in.
Right. So, I also wish that with a lot of these different kinds of speaker jams, or there's also sites that have a lot of different recordings posted, that we could bring those into prisons and actually just give opportunities. I know that a pet peeve of mine with all the conventions that go on around the United States, it was really when I went to the London convention and I saw that simulcast into a prison, it was one of the most energizing, exciting moments to see all of those inmates. They were so happy to be acknowledged and to be cheered. They were listening to the messages. It's something that I think, especially at this time, it's really a way to really bridge a gap and get people excited about what's possible in Narcotics Anonymous.
How many times and when do the Northeast Zonal Forum and Southeast Zonal Forum meet? It was answered in the chat, but I'm sure the other participants might want to know that.
Monthly.
The Northeast Zonal Forum meets monthly, but I really think it was for the last 4 months that we've been meeting in tandem. And kind of like a tag team. And then in addition to that, there were some separate ad hoc meetings that were scheduled to address the video project. And actually, The video project is something that is still possible to do some collaboration on. We took an inventory of topics and prioritized one of the topics, and I think the video we're gonna do upcoming is about, collaborating on these different service roles, because right now, especially with COVID, there's so many things that are kind of converging with what we need to be doing with helpline, meeting list, phone line. I know that the Shane's Home Group has created a national phone line. Through their home group contributions, they're supporting a phone line service where a text message will be sent out for any zip code that's typed in across the continental United States, and you will get a virtual meeting info sent to you, like immediately in real time. And I think it's through Twilio, but that's a absolute example of shared services and practice in response to COVID. And I think we're also using a lot of creative action to come up with ways to do more shared services.
There was one question in the chat from, oh, stop talking. You're making me miss it. There we go. Nope, I missed it. Adam had a question and I can't find it now. Hold on. From a functional standpoint, what's the difference between shared services and collaboration? Would you say shared services is ongoing, i.e. phone line and website, but collaboration is for a single project, i.e. exactly. That's exactly the difference in our opinion. The collaboration is usually the beginning of adding something to shared services or not, but it's definitely a project by project basis as opposed to something that's more formalized.